Welcome to Fanfiction Audiobook. Marvel, God of Speed. Chapter 1. New York City, located on the Atlantic coast of the southeastern part of New York State, is the largest city and the largest port in the United States. It is one of the largest economic centers in the world, directly affecting the financial, media, political, entertainment and fashion industries of all countries on the Blue Star. In the early morning, as the golden sun rises, hurried people walk out of their homes with the pride on their faces, and as locals, they are entitled to pride because they can feel the most fashionable and best things in the world every day. Even those who only work here naturally walk with their heads held high, like pilgrims entering the church. For the whole world, getting a job in New York will be the beginning of a rise to high society, and among the many companies in New York, the most admired and desirable is Stark Industries. If entering New York is equivalent to getting a gold brick that is enough for you to succeed, then entering Stark Industries means that you are standing on a mountain of gold. As long as you are careful not to get overly excited, fall from it and break your leg, then your future is destined to be bright, and luxury cars and beauties are greatly dripped. But as a member of this golden mountain, the young Albert is very unhappy today, because not long ago, the personnel department issued a layoff list, and he, a new researcher who has just joined the Stark Industries group, is impressively listed. As a traverser, Albert himself did not have much desire. Before coming to this world, he believed in the concept of small wealth is peace, and he never had any extravagance, and after coming to this world, he learned that he was actually a researcher of Stark Industries, and he couldn't be more satisfied with the bright future of money. As for this is the Marvel Universe, there will be countless crises in the future. To be honest, after the initial gains and losses of these things, Albert directly forgot about them, not that he didn't want to care, but he really couldn't manage it, and there were only two ways for the superhero world to become stronger. The rich rely on technology, the poor rely on mutations. The former is just a researcher. Albert is definitely not involved, the latter, you can consider a challenge, but the professionalism of the former researcher told him that the lethality rate of most mutations is extremely high. If you want to rely on this, you have to think about whether your life is hard enough. After excluding these 2 points, with the knowledge that I have only seen a part of the Marvel movies, the possibility of becoming strong enough to deal with various crises is almost completely equal to zero. Therefore, Albert quickly gave up thinking about these things. The sky fell and there was still a tall man to top, not to mention that according to the routine of the movie, Thanos snapped his fingers, half of the life in the universe was wiped out, and what about superheroes? It was not turned into dust, and as soon as the wind blew, it disappeared. Ignoring the crisis that may come in the future, Albert tried his best to integrate himself into the new identity. How to say that Stark is also a character like his own son, and it is always a lot more stable to follow him. However, this process is not easy. In his previous life, he was just an ordinary office worker, and although Albert's predecessor was just a budding researcher, he was also a real high-achieving student in the physics department, otherwise he would not have been recruited by Stark Industries. It took a lot of time for Albert to fully absorb the legacy of his predecessor, but fortunately everything came smoothly, which has to be thankful for the work mode that is common almost all over the world, and newcomers have to start with chores. Just the processing of the offcuts, Albert can still do it. Not long ago, Albert, who completely absorbed the memories of his predecessor, was informed yesterday that he had successfully passed the probationary period and could officially start participating in various research programs of Stark Industries, and since then he has reached the pinnacle of his life, which is really a double happiness, for which he also paid out of his own pocket to invite a colleague to have a good time, but as soon as he arrived at the company today, he received a layoff notice, and you can imagine how depressed he was. However, depressed, Albert can only pack up his things, receive a relatively generous severance pay and leave, and there is no reason to talk about a large company like Stark, otherwise the consequences will only be more tragic. Putting the documents on the table, Albert casually glanced at the colleagues around him, and many of them showed gloating expressions on their faces. Albert could only smile helplessly. It was really the wall that everyone pushed it, even if he was as enthusiastic as an iron buddy yesterday. When he heard the news of his dismissal today, he didn't even have anyone to help him clean up. "Hey Albert, I'm sorry you're leaving today. It's not your fault, we all know you're working hard, but the company's decision is not something we can change. I hope you understand." Bauer, the director of the research department, took back Albert's papers with a look of regret and whispered comfort. "I knew that maybe I wasn't doing enough. After all, I had just graduated and I still needed to gain experience." Packing all his things into a cardboard box, Albert replied with a smile, although he was a little angry, but there was no need to show it here, and Mr. Bauer had taken good care of him before, let alone the object of anger. "It's best if you think so. Even though you were fired from the company, I'm sure it's going to be a valuable experience in your life, and you'll get a lot out of it." With a regretful pat on Albert's shoulder, Bauer turned and went back to his office. He was really optimistic about Albert a long time ago, but he couldn't change the above meaning, not to mention that Stark Industries had so many people coming in and out every year, and even he couldn't guarantee that he would be able to sit firmly in the position of director. Where would he have the leisure to care about Albert's going and staying? Holding his small suitcase through the inspection and walking out of Stark Tower, Albert turned to look at the resplendent mansion behind him. Well, it was dazzling, and his eyes were about to be blinded. Albert quickly turned around, turned his back to the sun outcropping behind Stark Tower, rubbed his eyes fiercely, and then strode away from this mountain of gold in New York with his legs raised. Chapter 2. Stark Industries is one of the landmarks of New York City, where all kinds of vehicles are flowing endlessly, but Albert is not in the mood to enjoy the grand scenery of this capital world, so he beckons a taxi to return to his current home. The fare and tips are not cheap, but it is affordable for Albert. Even if he has just been fired, Albert himself is not poor. On the contrary, he can be regarded as a small asset. The house in Manhattan is definitely not cheap. Thanks to the inheritance of his former parents, Albert can still live here safely, and there is a 7-figure deposit lying on the savings account, which is enough for him to live a stable life for a considerable period of time, as long as he does not go around. Back in the room, Albert put the cardboard box on the table and lay on his back on the bed. He wanted to sort out his emotions. During this time, in order to quickly integrate the memories of his predecessor, his spirit was a little too tense, and this time he was fired just to relax, so as not to leave any hidden dangers. Zzzi. What's the sound? Albert, who was lying on the bed and was about to take a break, suddenly heard a few sounds similar to electricity, and looked at a table in the corner of the room in confusion, which was where his predecessor was doing small experiments at home, and many unclean circuit originals were scattered on the table, and Albert didn't have the heart to tidy it up during this time. "I remember that the power was cut off here for safety." Getting up and walking over to the table, Albert checked the power supply, and sure enough, the plug had been unplugged, but the sizzling sound of electricity was still there, and it seemed to be getting louder and louder. Carefully separating the pile of originals, Albert found a transparent box made of insulating material, and the sound came from inside. Frowning and thinking for a while, before he remembered from his memory where this thing came from. There is a simple current transformer in the box, but the connection on the line is not a normal thing, but a finger-sized, pits on the surface of the reddish-brown rock. This is the predecessor when he graduated. His mentor gave him a graduation gift. It is said that this stone can detect unusual current reaction. The predecessor studied for a period of time, but there was no result, and he was busy looking for a job at the time, so it has been put on hold, only occasionally when he has time to take it out to sea. Now it seems that this is indeed a special stone, and even people with little knowledge can see at a glance that this little thing is obviously abnormal, because the ammeter pointer connected to the wiring is twitching like a convulsion. It's not going to explode, is it? Albert felt a little empty in his heart. If this was in a normal blue star, he wouldn't panic, but this is the Marvel Universe, who knows if this stone is a bomb left by some advanced civilization. If he has just been dismissed and killed by this thing, then he will be too sad. Before Albert could figure out whether to throw this thing out, the sound of the sizzling electricity seemed to have reached its peak, and a visible electric current suddenly erupted from the reddish-brown rock, and the entire circuit was directly burned, and even the inner wall of the insulated box showed traces of melting. This change directly strengthened Albert's idea of throwing away this trouble. He didn't want to die so unclear. But before he could make any moves, an even more powerful electric light suddenly erupted, not giving him the slightest time to think. The box as an insulator did not play any role at all this time, and the electricity went straight up Albert's arm, enveloping him all over his body in the blink of an eye. However, what is surprising is that there is no trace of electricity left on Albert's body, as if the electric light just now is just an illusion. The only thing that has changed is the hand he held the box just now. Everything including the box has turned to ashes, only a broken reddish-brown stone remains, and on the back of Albert's hand, a lightning sign flashes. If Albert had been awake by now, he would have noticed that the frequency of the lightning bolt logo was approaching the rate of his heartbeat, and when the two were completely harmonized, the flashing logo disappeared, as if the two had become one and the other. At the same time that Albert lost consciousness due to the mysterious electric shock, 5 illusory but incomparably majestic figures appeared at the end of the universe at the same time. Originally, there was no life here, only endless silence, but not long ago, a gate appeared here out of thin air, and 5 gods and some other beings discovered it, but no one of them could shake the seemingly ordinary stone door. After a long period of observation without results, many people gave up on continuing to explore, but today it suddenly reacted, and after a slight tremble, the electric light wrapped around it began to pass, and one of the 5 gods looked at each other and one of them stepped out. He just waved his invisible arm slightly, and a wave with a strong aura of annihilation slammed into the door. Just like the sulfuric acid dripping on the table and causing a corrosive reaction, the annihilation wave hit the door and did make a different change, but this change did not last long. A white light rose from the door, meager but unbreakable. Seeing this situation, the god who made the temptation stopped his movements and disappeared at the same time as the others. Since there will be changes, then there will naturally be a result, and they have enough patience to wait until the universe comes to an end. Chapter 3. What's the situation? How can I lie on the ground? The sun has set, and the night has covered the land again. Thanks to Edison for bringing light to the night. Even without the sun, the street lamps on the street that are always on all night still give everyone the ability to see. Albert got up from the ground with some difficulty. First he confirmed the surroundings. Well, the familiar ceiling, or his own home, did not cross again. This is good news. Glanced at the alarm clock on the other side of the bed. It was already 9 o'clock in the evening. This coma is a day. Albert, who was trying to move his body, quickly felt the paralysis that had not completely subsided, which immediately reminded him of what had happened before he fell unconscious, so he immediately looked at his right hand, and all that was left of the place where he had grabbed the box was a stone that had broken into several petals. Am I lucky not to be electrocuted? Seeing that the culprit of everything had been obviously scrapped, Albert breathed a sigh of relief inexplicably, but soon he felt doubts. That strong electric shock sensation could definitely kill him easily, and until now there is a slight paralysis, clearly indicating that this is not a hallucination. So how did he survive? Placing the gravel on the table, Albert checked his body and the tables and chairs around him, but his brow furrowed deeper, and the scorched black marks appeared around after a large number of electric shocks, but there were no scars on his own body, which was obviously abnormal. Could it be that I am an insulating physique, or is it directly immune to the damage of electricity? Is this my golden finger crossed? The puzzled Albert's thinking obviously began to diverge. Since the conventional truth does not make sense, then start thinking about the unconventional. Anyway, this is not a normal blue star. The existence of superhumans can be confirmed. It is impossible for a traverser not to have ambition. The reason why he did not pursue more things, in addition to his personal mentality, is more of a lack of strength. The reason why Albert is willing to accept an ordinary life, the main problem is that he can't find an effective way to become stronger. In the first 2 days of crossing, he also made all kinds of strange shapes, trying to find his possible golden finger. The result was naturally a failure. All attempts told him that he had no mutation, no system, no gold finger, he was just an ordinary person. So Albert reigned in his loss and accepted his fate as an ordinary person with peace of mind. But today's experience awakened his silent desire, his thinking began to diverge, and even began to fantasize about the future of the killing. Thinking of the excitement, he even jumped up and threw a punch forward excitedly. However, at this moment, Albert found that the whole world suddenly slowed down, a strange energy began to spread from his heart to his whole body, and the red electricity on his arm flashed suddenly. Just for a moment, his whole person rushed out with the fist he swung, and hit the load-bearing wall of good quality straight up, and suddenly the cement blocks flew one after another, and even the steel bars in the wall were lifted off. Ahem, Few waved his hand to disperse the dust on the pavement. Albert subconsciously spit out the foreign object in his mouth, but found that there was nothing, and after being stunned for 3 full seconds, his expression began to be irrepressibly ecstatic. Ha ha ha, I finally have extraordinary power, Godspeed power. This is the 5th basic power from the DC universe, the absolute top power. I finally have the qualification to stand at the peak. Albert doesn't care why the speed power of the DC universe will appear in the Marvel universe and be obtained by him, as long as he does get this power, it is enough, and he doesn't care if there is any black hand behind the scenes. He had already accepted his fate as an ordinary person, and now that the transcendent road was in front of him, how could it be possible for him to give up? Even if there was really a conspiracy, Albert would not hesitate to gamble on an unknown fate for a brilliant future. He gambled. After the ecstasy, Albert forcibly calmed himself down. He can't lose his mind because he has obtained the speed force. He will have a lot of things to do, but for now, let's figure out his state first. Because of the different methods of obtaining the speed power, the people who obtain it are different, and the final form of power will be different. Take the most famous Flash Barry Allen. In addition to basic abilities such as super speed, he has the ability to travel through time and space, while the Flash Kid Wally West can give or steal the speed of others, and even use his mind to shape the speed force into solid, and the original Flash J can slow down his aging and so on. Lying back on the bed, Albert tried to communicate with the Speedy Force. He had to know what kind of abilities he had gained, although whatever it was must be very powerful, but at this time it was like you were playing a game, scraping together the tokens, and were about to make a 10-game match. The feeling was the same. This kind of unknown was fascinating. As the crimson current flashed on his arm again, Albert smiled happily, although it is rumored that the speed of the Speed Force is related to the color, but in fact, DC officials have never had a similar setting, so Albert will not be distressed by this, the rumored slowest color. Communication with the Divine Speed Force was so smooth that Albert himself couldn't believe it, as if the Divine Speed Force itself was very eager to see him. Almost at the moment when the red arc enveloped his body, his consciousness sank into a sea of lightning, and then he saw a door, a stone door that didn't look special, with a meager white light shining on it. Albert controlled his consciousness to approach the stone door, and wanted to touch it, but was bounced away by the white light, unwilling to use the speed force to contact, but also failed. He had no choice but to give up, and instead observed. He soon found that there was a small gap in the upper left of the complete stone door, about the size of a thumb. Thanks to the high-speed thinking in the Speed Force, Albert almost immediately recognized the gap. The shape was exactly the same as the previous broken stone. I see. Does the Speed Force come from this door? What is behind the door? Albert, who wanted to understand, was even more eager to find out what secret this door was, but at this time, something happened in the ocean of Speed Force, and an overwhelming crushing sound came, and Albert's consciousness was directly kicked out of the Speed Force. Chapter 4. At night, in the incomparably brilliant New York City under various lights, a crimson lightning bolt invisible to the human eye galloped out, with dazzling brilliance, pulling a long red arc, running through New York Times Square, through the endless traffic lane, with a burst of hair-blowing airflow, towards the outside of New York City. Wow! That's so cool! Albert ran as hard as he could, unhindered, in the midst of the red arc, and he felt that he had never been so happy in his life, and in his life. In the oncoming wind, the streets were full of large and small cars like a slow turtle. He walked alone against the storm, but even the roaring wind was easily left behind by him, and Albert was a lightning bolt that cut through all obstacles in the way ahead. I'm the fastest man in the world. With indescribable pleasure, Albert stopped at the outskirts of New York. It was close to midnight at this time, and there was no half a figure here except him, so he could vent his pent-up emotions to his heart's content, and when the dust settled, Albert found a place to lie down and look at the starry sky, stretching out his hand as if touching the stars. 200 to 300 times the speed of sound, that's a bit slow. Although he didn't have precise calculations, Albert still had a rough sense of how fast he was, thanks to the speed of thinking he had gained in the Speed Force, and the problems that could be solved just by time were not difficult for him. More than 200 times the speed of sound, even if Albert has just gained the speed power, it is enough to assume the title of the fastest in the world, at least on the current Blue Star. There is nothing that can compare with his speed, but he still thinks that he is slow. Is he slow? Compared with other speedsters, he is indeed not fast. As the ceiling of the speedster, the speed of the Lightning Kid Wally West even reached a terrifying 9 trillion times the speed of light, not to mention the speed that surpassed everything in an instant after he absorbed the speed of everyone on the Earth in order to defeat the cosmic god. This is Albert's predecessor model. However, as a newcomer who has just obtained the speed of God, Albert is also very good. If you don't have a specific concept of this more than 200 times the speed of sound, then you can refer to the picture of Quicksilver saving people in Apocalypse, when Quicksilver's speed was about 300 times the speed of sound, and now Albert has a close speed, which shows how fast he is. But what is my power? That door seems to have an unusual secret. Lying on the grass and completely relaxed, Albert recalled the door he saw in the Sea of Speed. Everything was so clear, even every line on the door, he could remember it clearly, but it was useless. After being kicked out by the Speed Force, Albert tried a few more times, but he couldn't get close, but the connection with the Speed Force told him that as long as he pushed the door open with the Speed Force, there would be a huge gain. To do this, Albert must improve his control of the Speed Force and take his speed to the next level, not only to figure out what's behind the door, but also to prepare a back path for himself that he may use. In his previous life, Albert didn't know much about the Marvel world, but he still watched the 3 big movies of the Avengers. Thanos snapped his fingers and erased half of the life in the universe, but he remembered it clearly. He didn't have a choice before, and now with the speed of God, he naturally has to fight, but if he really can't stop Thanos, he needs a way out. If Albert doesn't want to gamble that half of the probability of survival, then that door is one of the possibilities. The Speed Force comes from the DC universe, and his speed power comes from the fragments of the door. If the two are not connected, he doesn't believe it. Maybe when the time is right, Albert can use the door to go to the DC world, so as to avoid the disaster. In order to achieve this, the first thing Albert needed to do was... That's right, it's to make money. The speed of money consumption between an extraordinary person and an ordinary person is definitely different. Before Albert felt that his savings were enough, but now it seems that it is too little, let alone $1 million, it is 100 million, and it is estimated that it can't withstand his consumption. All kinds of professional equipment are worth a lot of money, not to mention the relevant research that may be carried out in the future. They are all bottomless pits, and it is basically difficult to move an inch without money. Not to mention the speed of improvement, which is to supplement the calories consumed during normal use, which is a lot of food expenses. In this case, Albert had to make a change, at least not as a researcher. He had to find a way to get more money, make some inventions, or seize the opportunity, go to the stock market and start a company of his own. Or it can be done at the same time. Invention is not an easy task, especially to make valuable inventions, but Albert has a fast thinking, has more time than the average person to understand and analyze, only need to find the right direction, may not be successful, the specific need to try to know the result, as for the latter is simple, just wait. Stark Industries is an opportunity. Tony Stark is still just a playboy now, and it is estimated that there is still a long time before he becomes Iron Man, but Albert knows what to expect, so this is an opportunity, just once, it is enough for him to make a lot of money. Standing up from the grass, Albert stretched out his hand to the shining stars in the night sky, opened his palm and shook it violently. From today onwards, I, Albert, will be one of you, and will be the most dazzling one, and the Speed Force will witness this. The crimson arc flickered, and Albert disappeared under the stars, only to be swept away in an instant, as if it was about to leave everything in the world far behind. Chapter 5. Brand New Polymer Materials, the Gospel of Aerospace Science and Technology. It can be harder than steel, and it can be as soft as polyester, a miraculous creation. The dismissed scientist, the genius who will never be buried, he is Albert. Good job, but isn't this last one a little bad? I don't plan to have any conflict with Stark Industries, Carl, we can't afford to mess with this trouble, for you and me. Albert placed on his desk several newspapers and periodicals, all of which belonged to America's leading publishing house for scientific and technical publications, and all of them, in an exaggerated tone, describing the same thing, a new synthetic material called a parasol. Just like its name, this material has a strong thermal insulation, itself is not flammable, while having a certain strength in itself. After continuing to increase to a certain thickness, it will have a very perfect buffer, even a sniper rifle bullet cannot penetrate. There is no doubt that this will be a completely new, quite versatile, material, whether it is used in aviation or military, is very suitable. And this is the result of Albert. It has been a few months since he obtained the Speed Force. In order to get more money to support himself, he has made many attempts after renting a small laboratory, but the results are not optimistic. He has to admit that it is not so easy to invent something completely new. Later, it was also from the suits of the previous generations of flashes, Albert got some inspiration, so he warned for a period of research and development testing, and the parasol was born, although it was a little hasty, but Albert could be completely sure that it had all the advantages depicted in the newspapers. After all, Albert was going to make money from this thing, and naturally he would not boast too much about the quality, but the descriptions in the newspapers were mostly in some exaggerated tones. We understand your concerns very well, we won't get you in trouble, and we won't want to provoke the big tiger of Stark Industries, it's just a small boo, Stark Industries won't care. The middle-aged man named Carl, who sat across from Albert, explained with a smile on his face, and since you want to sell your patents, is there a more perfect object than Stark Industries? Carl is a professional who is proficient in building momentum. Whether an invention patent can make money, in addition to its own function, the more important thing is naturally reputation. Only when everyone knows such a thing, will choose to buy it, which is also the meaning of advertising. Albert doesn't know how to operate, but some people know how to get enough benefits, as long as you pay the money, so he found Carl, paid a lot of commission, and the publicity work began, although it has not yet reached the level of household name, but at least a few top-related companies must have received the news, and these are Albert's goals. Since the successful patent application, Albert has never thought of producing it himself, because the two industries related to it, aerospace and military industry, belong to the hunting grounds where predators gather. Unless he wants to make a big deal and directly use the Speed Force to solve all the problems, then the problem is gone, but the consequences are really unpredictable. Before he figured out the situation of the door in the Speed Force and left a way back for himself, Albert didn't want to attract the attention of some supernatural forces. The Speed Force is very strong, but it is by no means omnipotent, and the early obscene development is the key. So cooperation is the key, the parasol is his stepping stone, and the development of cooperation with large enterprises is also the path that most independent researchers will choose, which is also one of Albert's goals. He will get an independent laboratory to complete his own ideas, which may be slower, but the most secure. Now that superheroes have not yet appeared collectively, the world pattern is relatively stable, and when everything is in chaos, he may have a chance to change, and this is not far off. Stark Industries is a good fit, but it's so strong that I'm afraid I'll swallow it in one bite. Albert was non-committal about Carl's proposal. Stark Industries was not his first choice. The next thing is to wait for the invitation to come to the door, and I hope not to disappoint me. You can rest assured that according to our promotional efforts, someone will reach out to you soon, and as long as the contract is signed, we will not let the customer's money go to waste. Carl has a strong confidence on his face. They have been doing this business since his father, and they have accumulated a very wide network, but there is no failure in any task they take, which is why Albert chose them. Money is not a problem, the problem is whether they can achieve their goal. They two exchanged pleasantries for a while. Carl packed up his things and left. Albert swept the newspapers and periodicals aside, opened his notebook and began to browse the latest news. Carl was wrong about one thing. He didn't receive the news soon, but he had already received the news. This group of capitalists was like sharks in the deep sea. They got specific information long before the newspaper was printed, and then rushed over like sardines, looking at the series of message prompts on the mailbox to know how enthusiastic they were. The level of science and technology in the Marvel Universe is not low. Compared to the Blue Star of the same period, it is even better. It stands to reason that even if Albert's new materials are indeed valuable, they will not make such a big move, but there is a problem that cannot be ignored, that is, the technology monopoly from the top, especially the leading enterprises led by Stark Industries. The average company has no chance at all, and has access to something amazing, not to mention that Albert has solved the problem of concept and research and development by himself, and only needs to lay out the production line to get the patent, which is extremely friendly to the vast majority of small and medium-sized companies. They have no monopoly ambitions. As long as they can get the authorization, it is enough. These companies Albert directly blocked without saying a word. This is not his dish. What really meets his requirements is. Sure enough, you, Hammer Industries, hee. Looking at the signature of one of the emails, Albert smiled happily. Chapter 6. Hammer Industries, like Stark Industries, belongs to the military industry, and has close ties with the military. It can also be said that Hammer Industries is one of the spokesmen of the military, but unfortunately even if there is the support of the bigwigs behind it, it can't do Stark Industries, the son of destiny, and its own market share is very uncomfortable. You must know that the current Stark Industry, Tony Stark is just that smart playboy, and what really supports the group is his uncle Obadiah Stein, a ruthless old fox. With him in control, Hammer has not been squeezed out of the basic plate of the military industry, even if the military gives him enough resources for this little brother. But no matter how hard the military is, it is impossible to abandon Stark Industries' more advanced weapons and place large orders for Hammer Industries, so the situation of Hammer Industries has become more and more sluggish in the past 2 years, and even if it weren't for the fact that Obadiah was killed by Tony Stark in the future, and closed the weapons department to transform into new energy, Hammer Industries might still be able to survive. Today's Hammer Industries, relying on doing some small business that Stark Industries looks down on, or relying on the help of military bigwigs, buying and selling some things that are still profitable to live. Its own scientific research department has a lot of things, and it can be regarded as very good alone, but the quality of things is afraid to compare. Even if Hammer does well, it can't surpass Stark Industries. As the controller of Hammer Industries, Justin has great ambitions and is also a tolerable one. Since high-end products can't be squeezed, then start from the low end. At least he has no problem with the channel, so although Hammer Industries is miserable, there is no danger of bankruptcy. For the new materials developed by Albert, Justin is quite optimistic. This is an opportunity for him. Heavy industry can't grab Stark, he admits this, but if he can win the exclusive license, Hammer Industries will have a breakthrough, no longer only sneaky smuggling, but also a fist product that can be handled. Justin knew very well in his heart, but how many protective clothing the US military would eliminate every year, and he knew better that the former could not be compared with the latter at all. This was not a time of war, and the consumption of weapons, especially heavy weapons, was not much, and the consumption of individual soldiers' armor, including but not limited to body armor, bulletproof helmets, and so on, was definitely much greater. The materials developed by Elbert can not only replace the materials of body armor, but also insert a foot in aviation. These two aspects Stark Industries do not say that they have no start at all, but compared to the weapons department, Justin is still sure that he will fight with Stark Industries. The military bosses behind him support him, and it also has the meaning of balancing Stark Industries, but the performance of Hammer Industries over the years is too embarrassing, even if the people above don't say it. Justin's own feelings are unbearable, so this time he is ready to exchange enough benefits. He believes that compared to Stark Industries, which fired Elbert before, Hammer Industries would be a perfect choice. "Catherine, does Dr. Elbert have a reply?" asked Justin, holding a goblet and shaking the scarlet liquid in it, looking out the window at the chaotic traffic, and looking confidently to the secretary who opened the office door. In his opinion, Elbert had no reason to refuse, his price was the highest, and the authority given was quite high, and no one would refuse his request. However, hearing his question, the secretary Catherine had an embarrassed look on her face. "I'm very sorry, boss, Dr. Elbert turned down our invitation." "What? Why?" Justin slammed his leisurely movements, and his palms clenched suddenly, almost spilling the swaying red wine, but he didn't care about red wine. Even if it was a glass, it would cost most of the salary of ordinary office workers, and he was still more concerned about why Elbert refused than red wine. "Is it Stark Industries that made a move?" "No, boss, although Stark Industries did send out invitations this time, but the specifications are all of the lowest level, and they can't compete with us at all. Dr. Elbert chose Osben." Seeing that Justin's face became ugly, the secretary quickly explained, and at the same time spread out the documents in his hand in front of Justin. "Osborne, is there such a company in the military industry?" Justin also frowned when he suddenly heard such an unfamiliar name, but with the documents handed over by the secretary, he understood. It turned out to be Norman Osborne. "Aren't they a biotechnology company? How can they be involved in this matter?" Osborne Industries Justin had heard, and even met its chairman, Norman Osborne, not long ago, as a military collaborator. There was no friendship between the two. He only knew that Norman seemed to have cooperated with a military general, and was conducting a research on human strengthening, and he had no reason to be involved with Elbert. After carefully reading the documents handed over by the secretary, Justin's brows furrowed even tighter. The conditions offered by Osborne were indeed good, but they were still a little inferior to him. He couldn't figure out why Elbert had given up on the olive branch he had thrown out and chose to work with Norman Osborne instead. "Mr. Justin, do we need to take action?" Seeing that Justin's expression gradually softened, Catherine also breathed a sigh of relief and asked cautiously. "No, you don't have to, forget it this time." Justin closed the file and finally gave up thinking. Since the matter was a foregone conclusion, it was useless to think more. Osborne's size was not bad, and he also had a military background. He couldn't put pressure on Norman, which would lead to a series of problems. "It's not worth it for an Elbert. If you miss the opportunity, you miss it, and if the military is dissatisfied because of internal strife, it will be really big." Wrote to Mr. Norman Osborne on my behalf, asking if he could share the patent for the new material. Chapter 7. Hello, Mr. Osborne. Hello, Dr. Elbert, I'm glad you accepted my invitation. You must know that when I decided to invite you, I didn't expect you to really choose our Osborne Industries. After all, whether it is Stark Industries or Hammer Industries, the conditions are no worse than ours, and their main projects are closer to your patents. Norman personally met Albert in the Osborne Collective building, the chairman's office, and after the two greeted him happily, Norman warmly invited Albert to sit down, with a warm smile on his face. "You're wrong, Hammer Industries' treatment is really good, but Stark Industries doesn't like my patents, they only give me a fairly ordinary treatment, and I don't want to be fired by them again." After receiving the coffee from the secretary, Albert thanked him and said, "As for why I chose Osborne, it was because of curiosity." "Curious?" Norman sat up straight, the expression on his face a little surprised, as if he had heard his secretary tell him that Albert had chosen to work with Osborne, which was indeed unexpected. "Yes, Mr. Osborne, you know, as scientists, we're always curious." Norman very much agrees with Albert's statement. He is not just a guy who just sits in an office and doesn't understand anything, he is one of the top people who stand at the forefront of biological research. Companies including Stark Industries and Hammer Industries, they chose to invite me, I can understand, but only Osborne, is in the field of biotechnology, which surprised me very much, and at the same time made me very curious, in order to figure out why you chose to invite me. So I came. That's really unexpected. Norman didn't know how to answer Albert's reasoning, but he was glad that he had handed over the invitation, rather than giving up on it. Osborne's main business is indeed biotechnology, his research is currently in its infancy, and the military also has strong support, so he really doesn't need Albert's patent to contribute to Osborne's research, but Norman is short of money, very short of money. Even with the military's investment, he persuaded the company's directors to invest a lot of money, but as the leader of the project, Norman knew very well how huge the cost of research would be, and it was a bottomless pit. But Norman can't give up, not only for his own career, but also to solve his family's genetic disease. He himself is not young, but he doesn't want to see that his son Harry is also suffering from genetic disease, so he has to complete the research anyway. For this he must ensure that the source of funds is sufficient, this cannot just rely on other people's investment, he has to ensure that there is a source of his own funds. Seeing Albert's patent come out, Norman was keenly aware that this was an opportunity. He also had military channels, as long as he got the patent, he would not worry about sales, and through this his contact with the military, it would be closer. This was an opportunity to kill two birds with one stone, for which he hesitated again and again. Norman still offered a very favorable condition, with the idea of giving it a try, and sent it to Albert's mailbox. Who would have thought that such an attempt, which he himself was not sure of the result, would actually succeed? This made Norman a little high-spirited, as the saying goes, everything is difficult at the beginning, and now not long after the research began, he came to such a good news. Does it also indicate that future research will also be smooth sailing? Norman was not a superstitious man, but he was still a little happy when he encountered this situation, and at the same time he was even more optimistic about Albert, the young man who brought him good luck. "Dr. Albert, Osborne's main business is indeed biotechnology, but this does not mean that we will not be involved in other fields, and compared to your patents, I look at you more yourself, you are still young, very young, this is capital. I believe that as long as you are provided with a suitable environment, you will bring more surprises to me and the whole world." As a qualified capitalist, even if the purpose is to make money with Albert's patents, Norman will not say this directly, but encourages him in a demagogic tone. "Believe me, Dr. Albert, and believe in yourself, your talent doesn't stop there, and Osborne Industries has everything to offer you. Really, Mr. Osborne, do you really believe that I can do better?" Albert looked at Norman with an excited face, as if he saw the only confidant in this life, and then lowered his head a little unconfidently. "But, Mr. Osborne, I think my ability may not be enough to meet your expectations." "No, Albert, allow me to call you that. You have to believe in yourself, you have enough time to learn, to try. Failure is just a ladder to growth for you, that is the inevitable path, just like the other Albert, he used thousands of failures to bring light to humanity, you just lack some self-confidence. Norman got up from the couch, pulled Albert to the window of the office, pointed to the busy staff below and said, I've decided to open a research department for you, a research department led by you, let it go, I trust you. It's so. Albert's face flushed with excitement, and even his hand shaking with Osborne trembled. I will live up to your expectations, and I will do all the research for Osborne. Very well, Albert, go ahead and go to Mr. Cullen, he will explain to you the new research department, and you can start building your own team at any time. Norman sent Albert out the door with a smile on his face, and the smile on his face disappeared the moment he turned around, replaced by a grim and haughty look. Chairman, do we really have to fulfill all of Dr. Albert's requests? The secretary looked at Norman with some puzzlement. He had never seen Norman think so highly of a young man. Of course not. Norman shook his head decisively. What he was most concerned about was only related to his family's scientific research plan. How could he fully support Albert's research? You can agree to some less important requests. As for those that are not suitable, you can directly hand them over to me, and I will solve them. Chapter 8. Well, old fox, you almost took me to the ditch. Walking out of Norman's office, Albert rubbed his cheeks vigorously, the flush began to fade, and he returned to his normal complexion, but fortunately, my acting skills are also good, and I can wait for the results of the research for the time being. Norman couldn't fully support Albert's research, and Albert wouldn't be stupid enough to really believe Norman's nonsense. It was just a false and wrongful thing. He wasn't sure if Norman would believe him, but it didn't matter, now that his goal had been achieved. The head of the new research department, the name is quite big, I just don't know how much actual power there is, but think about it, I also know that it is impossible to really put him in charge of everything, then Norman is really a fool, although the new material may make money, but the value is not to that extent. How much power can be won? Albert doesn't care too much. The purpose of his coming to Osborne is not this, or his purpose in the first place, it is not at all. To be honest, as a department head, it is too slow. The head of department is just a springboard, and when it comes to capital accumulation, what could be faster than swallowing a ready-made large enterprise? As long as there are no bottom lines involved, Albert doesn't care about taking a bigger step. At first, Albert's chosen target was Hammer Industries, and Justin did jump over as he expected. If it follows the plan, Albert will naturally settle in Hammer Industries. Unlike other companies, Hammer Industries seems to be Justin in the decision, but it is the military bigwigs behind him who really speak effectively, which creates a problem. As long as he shows enough value, Albert can bypass Justin and make a deal directly with the military, or even directly replace him. It is not difficult to do it. The military only likes Justin because he is useful, but it is just a matter of words to abandon him. Just like in the movie, the Morning Whip was killed by Iron Man and Rhodes for revenge, and Justin, as his boss, was pushed out by the military, saying that he would give up without hesitation. However, just as Albert was about to act according to the plan, another invitation appeared, that is, Osborne Industries, which quickly made him change his mind, because the plan could never catch up with the changes, and he did not know the specific situation of Hammer Industries, and it was easy for some things to change, resulting in things not going as he expected, compared to Osborne Industries, which was a little different. At least Albert knew that Norman Osborn might be the first villain Spider-Man faced, the Green Goblins, and the Norman Osborn family's genetic disease, which made room for manipulation. And unlike Hammer Industries, which is almost completely manipulated by the military, Osborne Industries itself only cooperates with the military, and still retains a certain degree of independence, and only needs to get the shareholders of Osborne Industries, and Albert can take it into his pocket. As for those annoying directors, Norman will solve this problem for him. While Albert was communicating with Norman, Stark Industries, Obady, was sorting out the company's recent earnings situation. Although he was a villain, but for Stark Industries, he did his best. There are two documents on the table. The one on the left is the normal profit, which belongs to the legitimate income that will not have the slightest problem if it is put out for people to check 3 times, and the one on the right is naturally some privacy that cannot be seen by outsiders, and even includes some of Obeideh's own private transactions. Quite a good performance, you are indeed a commendable assistant, Daniel. Obeideh had a satisfied smile on his face, and it was clear that he was pleased with the numbers on the report. As Stark Industries grows bigger, he doesn't take care of everything himself, and he leaves some minor problems to his assistants to deal with. Obeideh's assistant has changed several times over the years, some because he is not very satisfied with the efficiency of the other party, some because he is too curious, and John, an old friend who has been with him for 3 years. Thinking of him, Obadiah couldn't help but feel a little nostalgic. This is a very good person, and he will figure out his thoughts, but unfortunately he knows too much, which makes Obeideh have to send him to God in advance. This is what I should do, you have given me trust, and I will naturally do what you tell me to do. Although Daniel has only been with Obeideh for less than half a year, he is already familiar with the character of this boss, so in the face of Obeideh's praise, Daniel only responded humbly. Great, it reminds me of old John again. Obadiah was pleased with Daniel's attitude, but there were some issues to be clarified, and he pulled out a copy of the document, which was different from the others, and it had an F printed on it, which meant that it was a failed contract, and the only one that failed. This is the only stain on you. I'm not a person who can't tolerate failure, but you can't let a single ink spot get on a blank piece of paper. It's too ugly. I hope it won't happen in the future. Yes, Mr. Obeideh, I will go and correct this mistake. Daniel bowed his head nervously and took the contract from Obeideh, with a picture of Albert on it, and apparently Albert's refusal made the good assistant a little criticized. This also made him hold a grudge against the young man in the photo, and he was ready to wait and communicate with his business partner, telling this young man who didn't know the height of the sky was not just a little capable of making a fortune, and going against Stark Industries was the biggest mistake in his life. Chapter 9. No, Daniel, I don't want to get any attention lately. Dr. Albert is just trying to get his own way. What do you want to do? Threat or inducement? We are serious businessmen, and this is free America. You don't have the power to change a person's opinion, you know. Seemed to hear the indignation in Daniel's tone. Obeideh's expression became serious, and he warned in a serious way. Yes, Mr. Obeideh, I see. Obeideh's face reminded Daniel of something bad, and he was terrified when he had suddenly changed his face a few months earlier, and then killed his former assistant, Mr. John, in front of him. Even if Obeideh didn't embarrass him at the time, Daniel still didn't sleep all night, and the next day he went to work in a daze, only to be notified that he had become a new assistant, which not only did not make him happy, but even more terrifying. Daniel has always been a swaggering posture in front of people, but in front of Obeideh, even a single facial gesture is enough to make him frightened, so he honestly chose to respect Obeideh's instructions and never cause any trouble, for which he even stopped trading with some partners. But as everyone knows, this kind of behavior makes Obeideh more and more dissatisfied with him. A dog that can do good things he likes, and a dog that is timid and can't do good things, he will not keep. I still miss old John a little bit. Watching Daniel leave the office with a bit of a slumber, Obadiah muttered something as if nostalgic, and then he cut off all communication between the office and the outside world, and walked into the separate bathroom at the side door. Confirming that no one would bother him at this time, Obadiah fumbled in front of the mirror in the bathroom, and soon he found a bulge on the edge of the mirror, a rather private point, which was hidden by the multiple reflections of the mirror, and as long as it was not directly touched, no matter what angle it was viewed, it was a smooth mirror. Obeideh's thumb stayed on the bulge for about 3 seconds, and the entire mirror began to fold from the center, and soon a screen of comparable size extended from behind, and Obeideh entered a few numbers on the screen, and the screen flashed twice, and a bald head with a fierce expression appeared on the screen. I've done what you said, and as long as there's no problem with your intelligence, I'll be able to get rid of the target in no time." The bald head squeezed out a few smiles in a hoarse voice, and pulled away from the camera to show the armed thugs behind him with loaded guns to obey. "Very good, I will give you the exact route in 2 days, as long as you do it, I can add 2% more to the previous price." Obey nodded with satisfaction, but there was still subtle disdain in his eyes. If it weren't for the fact that it was inconvenient for him to let his people make a move, where would he use this kind of little deflated? "No, I'm going to double it. Tony Stark's head is more than the previous price, it's a big deal, and I'm going to pay a huge price for it, you can't make me lose money." Obadiah thought that his price was enough to satisfy anyone, but he still underestimated the appetite of a warlord who survived in the Imperial Cemetery, and after listening to Obaday's offer, he was not satisfied, but even increased to an even larger number. "We have already said before, you can't regret it now, you must know that you can survive until now, and the weapons you rely on are purchased from me, don't cut off the back road." Obaday's face turned ugly for a moment, but he still suppressed his anger and gritted his teeth. "It's you who don't cut off the back road, I know your purpose, the whole Stark Industries, as long as you get it, my little money is not sprinkled?" The bald head was unimpressed by Obaday's anger, he was sure that Obaday would never give up this opportunity, and in the vicinity, no one but him could do this business, this was a seller's market, and if he had any conditions, Obaday would have to continue. "Yes, but I don't pay until I see Stark's body." Obaday's face changed several times, and finally agreed to the bald head's conditions, and when he saw this, the bald head laughed and turned off the communication, leaving Obaday standing in place with a blue face. "Look for death." Returning the screen to a mirror, Obaday laughed disdainfully, he was never ready to pay, and the bald blackmail could only make Obaday decide to let him die a little worse. It is really difficult to solve the matter of Tony Stark, but it is very suitable for him to get rid of the thug who killed Tony Stark, first, to cut off the evidence, and it is also a good opportunity to win people's hearts, and it will be much easier for him to take over Stark Industries at that time. Thinking of Tony, Obaday's face was a little regretful, like his father, Tony is a genius, Obaday has to admit that Stark Industries can have today, his management only accounts for a small part of it, Stark's invention of weapons, is the real key. Sometimes Obaday wants to dig out Tony's brain, to see what is the difference between ordinary people. There was once a design problem, he asked nearly half of the staff in the research department to work overtime for a month, but they couldn't solve the problem, but Tony only took an hour, not only solved the problem, but also optimized the original design, and then after that product was launched, Stark Industries made a lot of money. Such an obvious gap, Obaday really couldn't bear to kill Tony. But he tried. Tony was a bastard, even more bastard than his dead dad Howard, he didn't get oil and salt at all, except to make him disappear. Obaday couldn't think of any other way to get Stark Industries, so after learning that Stark was going to test a new missile in the Imperial graveyard, Obaday planned this plan. In the United States, he is not easy to touch Tony, but out of the United States, it is still the extremely chaotic place of the graveyard of empires, and it is difficult for Obaday not to be moved. Just wait a few more days, wait a few more days, Stark Industries will belong to me, it should have belonged to me a long time ago. Chapter 10. Osborne Industries got Albert's patent authorization. Norman spent a little time to confirm the nature of the material, and began to let the designer make a few feasible samples. In the past 2 days, Norman, in addition to his own laboratory, basically will go to see the test results of the finished product. Everything is perfect. The military people, after watching the demonstration, also said that they will buy in large quantities. Everything seems to be on the right track, towards the end of success. What has Dr. Albert been doing lately? Norman, who was busy and free, finished working on the backlog of papers, and then remembered Albert, who had been left to his side, and he hadn't paid much attention to it for the past 2 days, hoping that nothing would go wrong. Yesterday Mr. Collins submitted a copy of the funding and related materials that Dr. Elbert had applied for, and I checked it, and it was all more ordinary, and I gave it an approval. The secretary took out a copy from the pile of papers and handed it to Norman, because Norman had been in the laboratory for a long time, and the secretary had a lot of power. As long as it was not related to fundamental issues, she had the right to decide. Well, you've done a good job. Hold Dr. Elbert steady first, and when this time is over, I'll arrange his work myself. Scanning the numbers on the document, Norman nodded secretly. This Elbert is still an acquaintance, and he didn't make a big mouth of the lion, otherwise he might have to use some extraordinary means, and everyone may not look good at that time. I understand the chairman. Is there anything else that needs to be dealt with? The secretary knew in her heart what attitude she should show towards Elbert in the future, and she could be regarded as having a bottom. It's okay, you go about your business. Norman waved his hand to the secretary to attend to his business, but halfway through his hand, a sudden pain forced him to take his hand back, and his slightly tired face was slightly distorted by the pain. Chairman, are you all right? Do you want me to call a doctor? The secretary was about to open the door and go out, and when he saw Norman's condition, he hurriedly walked back and asked worriedly. No, it's an old problem, I'll just slow it myself. Get out of here, and don't let anyone come in and disturb me. Clutching his right arm, Norman collapsed in the chair and forced the pain to let the secretary out. You pay attention to your body. Seeing this, the secretary didn't say much, and honestly led the door out. She was able to gain Norman's trust, precisely because she never hesitated to Norman's words, even if Norman's state was obviously a little wrong now. She didn't choose to disobey Norman's intention to stay, or call a doctor. It was only after about a quarter of an hour that Norman's face softened, and the pain began to subside, but the green spots on his arms looked more dense, which made his face pale from the pain instantly turn blue. What's going on? It's only been 2 months since the last checkup, and it's impossible to have a seizure so soon, so it looks like I have to go for a re-checkup. Norman lowered his sleeves. The family disease was like a curse, no known means of treatment. Once it began, it meant that life had begun to count down, and the process would be quite painful, until he fell asleep in despair. It's just that Norman is a little puzzled. According to the results of the last inspection, there should be no problems in the past year. Because of this, he chose to cooperate with the military at this time, just to take advantage of his good state to develop a successful human body strengthening formula as soon as possible to solve this curse. But after 2 months, it came back like a ghost, and the results of the examination would not go wrong, and Norman still had this confidence, so it can only mean that the symptoms have changed in the body in the past 2 months, and it is very likely to kill him. We have to speed things up. Norman thought about it, but picked up the phone. He didn't have time to wait slowly, he had to speed up the process of everything. On the other side of the phone, Norman insisted that all experiments with new materials must be completed by tomorrow, and that the finished product should be ready for mass production within a week. Then Norman called several people in charge of the laboratory. All of them urged them to act, which could lead to a series of problems, but Norman couldn't manage so much. As long as the funds were available, he would have to devote himself to researching the strengthening potion, compared to which even Osborne Industries was secondary. In Osborne Industries' new laboratory, Elbert assigned the analysis of several materials to the researchers below, and walked into the independent office himself, during which time he was indeed quite honest, because he did not need to be high profile. Things were going in the direction he expected. Norman's illness is about to happen. Elbert turned on the TV on the side, turned up the sound to the maximum, and looked in the direction of Norman's office through the wall, as if he could see Norman gritting his teeth and enduring. According to the original development, Norman's genetic disease may not enter the advanced stage until a few years later, so Elbert injected some changes into him. The speed force can not only act on the movement of the human body, more refined, it can affect the cells, most of the speed of the people, in addition to the speed of the change, at the same time their body of the self-healing cells will also be accelerated, which allows them to recover quickly after injury, and some of the speed of the people, can even use the speed force to affect the self-healing cells of others, and then achieve the purpose of healing others, but depending on the connection with the speed force, this ability may make the target lose its vitality, or not. Albert doesn't care if he loses his life force, what he cares about is whether the speed force can act on other parts besides the self-healing cells. The answer is yes, at least Albert can do it. He doesn't know if other speeders can do it, or if this is one of his own uniqueness. As early as when shaking hands with Norman, Albert controlled the speed force, quietly entered Norman's body, and accurately acted on his family's genetics. This change will make Norman's disease, which would have taken several years to completely break out, come to an end in the next few months, and even if Norman goes to examine it carefully, he will not find any other problems, and in the process, the speed force that Albert sent into his body has long disappeared without a trace. Chapter 11. In the past few months, Albert has not given up, digging into the changes brought about by the speed force. Super speed is the most basic and core thing, but other abilities cannot be underestimated, such as crossing physical obstacles. This is quite practical, which means that even if he is trapped by human design, Albert can get out safely. In order to pass through the entity, it requires considerable control, and the speedster must have full control over the kinetic energy of his own molecules at the molecular level, and when he needs to enter or pass through a solid object, he only needs to match the vibrational frequency of his own identity particles to the same as the vibrational frequency of the object's molecules. This is something that the second-generation Flash Barry Allen can do, but the third-generation Flash Wally West is slightly less able to control, so when a solid object comes into contact with Wally, the object tends to explode, while the fourth-generation Flash Bart Allen is even worse, he will melt the object he touches directly, although this is another way to penetrate the obstacles. Albert's control of this ability is not particularly good, as can be seen from the fact that when he first gained the speed force, he directly knocked down the load-bearing wall of his house. In later attempts, Albert's behavior was similar to Wally's, but it was more destructive. The object did not explode, but was disturbed by the speed force, and the molecular structure was disrupted and directly disintegrated. Albert is not satisfied with this, but he really tried to change this ability from only acting on objects to being able to act on living organisms, and the speed force makes Albert's speed enough to deal with most situations, but the attack alone is actually not particularly good. But there is something in the Marvel Universe that has extremely high resistance to pure physical damage, that is, vibranium, Edelman alloy. If a piece of armor was to be made of vibranium, Albert wasn't sure how fast he would have to speed up to gather the energy to break the vibranium defenses, so other countermeasures were necessary. Over the course of his long research, Albert discovered that his speed force, like the red color it appears on the outside, is quite aggressive, and its derivative abilities are closer to destruction than to construction or restoration. Even if Albert concentrates his spirit enough, he can make the speed force behave like a real electric current, frantically destroying everything around him, and this damage is irreversible, and even Albert suspects that after being injured by this destructive speed force, even if he uses the time gem, he may not be able to recover. Albert had roughly confirmed that the form of his own divine speed power was a spear, an indestructible supreme spear, and anything that stood in his way would be destroyed. Tony Stark, dreamer, genius, patriot. He has created a new pattern in the arms industry and defended the freedom of the United States and the interests of the country in the world. He is a true patriot. Tomorrow in Las Vegas, Colonel Rhodes will present Tony Stark with the highest honor of the year. Please follow this station on time tomorrow, we will broadcast the whole thing. Just when Albert was thinking about it, the report that appeared on TV directly pulled him back. Although the news has passed, Tony Stark's photo is still hanging in the bottom right of the screen, and a line of gold words "Winner of the highest honor of the year" is attached, which can't be ignored. The awards show in Las Vegas is this time so soon, and luckily Norman has already paid some of the patent fees, otherwise I would have missed it for nothing. Albert's mind raced quickly and soon came to the conclusion that in the next 60 hours or so, the Patriot would be missing, and soon after, Iron Man would be born. Albert didn't care much about the internal struggle of Stark Industries, but he had been waiting for this opportunity for a long time. This was the fulcrum of the change, and the royalties paid by Norman were Albert's crowbar to pry the stock market. With enough funds, Albert will be able to speed up the annexation of Osben. Iron Man is about to be born, other superhumans will also be born one after another, the world of great controversy will begin, and everyone will have reached the moment of fighting for their lives, whether he is a blockbuster or a penny, it depends on whether he can adapt to this era. Speaking of which, if I annex Osborn Industries and then directly destroy all the original experiments, will Spider-Man still be born? Albert thought for a moment. He was not prepared to intervene in the birth of Iron Man, and it would be good to make money behind the scenes, because he has not fully adapted to this world, and if he directly intervenes in the case of possible OAA, there may be some unexpected situations. But other heroes are different, such as Spider-Man. Albert can eliminate the reason why Peter Parker became Spider-Man at the root, so what will be the result? Will Peter Parker be an ordinary person from now on, or will there still be other spiders who will bite him and make him Spider-Man? This is a feasible experimental question. Albert felt the need to test whether the world would react to the impact on him. Albert was not interested in going against those superheroes, but no one could guarantee that there would be no conflict when the interests were fixed. You want the cake, I also wanted the cake, what should you do if you can't convince the other party? Of course, it's a fucking fight. Who will reason with you if you win? Superheroes can basically be regarded as the sons of the Marvel Universe. Once there is a conflict, it will inevitably cause some turmoil. Albert has to determine the size of this turmoil through temptation. If it is not too serious, then he can also let go a little, but if it is a dimensional lord of the level of Dormammu, the degree of direct blocking of the door, Albert still feels that there is nothing wrong with being low-key. Chapter 12. You can test the waters with Iron Man. Well, then I have to take 2 days off. In addition to heroes like Iron Man, maybe villains can also try. Albert smiled. What he did to Norman was not a temptation, but it was not on the surface, he was just pushing it secretly. Sooner or later, the Osborn family's genetic disease will attack, and Albert is just speeding up the process, rather than going directly against the general trend. And most villains seem to be unpopular compared to superheroes, and even if they may have an impact, the consequences must be much smaller. As for Spider-Man's lack of such an opponent as the Green Goblin, will there be a problem? Of course not, since Spider-Man can be born in this case, it will naturally spawn a villain who replaces the Green Goblin, and the world revolves around the hero, not the villain. Thinking of this, Albert got up and turned off the TV, and prepared to leave Osborn Industries directly. Norman did not arrange any research projects for him, and although it was a new research department, the number of researchers under Albert was pitiful. Everything was in its infancy, except for simple analytical work. The conditions were not even better than the temporary laboratory that Albert had rented before, except that it did not cost money. Dr. Albert, I was about to go to you. As soon as Albert walked out of the office, he saw the deputy director Colin, walking over with a folder. He was arranged by Norman in the name of an assistant. In fact, it was naturally used as a constraint to restrain Albert, so even with a smile on Colin's face, Albert always felt that he was looking at himself with an arrogant attitude, with a suspicious gaze. It's not that Albert's persecution delusion is a crime, but it's the reality he sees from the perspective of the Speed Force, and some speeders will also speed up their minds because of the Speed Force, which is never a pleasant experience. Sometimes it can be useful, but it will not be worth trying to listen to someone for months or even years. So when it is not necessary, most speedy people will slow down their thinking, and the same is true for Albert, but sometimes he will also apply this kind of speedy thinking to observe the people around him, and no secret can hide from him from this perspective, unless that person can deceive himself first, and truly achieve a state that is no different from ordinary people. What's the matter, Colin? I'm getting ready to go back and deal with personal matters. Albert doesn't mind someone holding him back, and if he were Norman, he would do the same, and rightfully so, but he hates Colin's attitude, so there's not much emotion between his tones. Well, it's the chairman who has a document for you to sign. It was the familiar tone again, which made Colin's expression slightly distorted, and he hated Albert's tone of voice that didn't care about him, which made him feel that he was being slighted. How dare he talk to me like this? He's just a puppet. As long as I say a few words in front of the chairman, he'll have to pack up his things and bastard. Do you really think he's an indispensable genius scientist? You wait for me. Oh, give it to me. Colin's expression changed, and it was clearly seen in Albert's eyes. Since the first time he spoke in a similar tone, he had found that Colin would be extraordinarily angry, seeing that Albert would tease him like this every time, and it felt quite interesting after a long time. Colin tried his best to hide the change in his expression, and when Albert looked down at the papers, he turned his face sideways and took a deep breath before putting on a false smile again. It's the quality certification of the new armor. I remember that according to the progress of the test, I should not confirm it until 3 days later. Is it so fast? It's not a big deal on the document. It roughly means that the materials he has authorized have produced qualified products, and Albert, as the inventor, said that this is indeed a pretty good way to use, and Osborne Industries has done a very good job and so on, just blowing a wave to prepare for advertising. The safety test has been completed. Don't you need me to take a look? From this document, Albert has seen Norman's urgency. This is too fast, not to mention that all the tests have been done. It would be good to have half of them. How to rush to get him to sign and put into production, showing that the Speed Force has indeed played its due effect, which is exactly what Albert wants to see. What does the chairman mean? No, don't you believe in the ability of Osborne Industries, Doctor? Colin asked with a sincere face, and in his heart he was crazy that Albert said yes. Only if he said it, he would have a reason to go to the chairman to sue him, let him know that he knew that he was powerful. Oh, well, what's the other one? Albert looked at Colin's micro-expression with amusement, and decisively signed his name. What is the quality of the new product? He knows in his heart, when he signs it, it will be the same. He doesn't need to say more on this kind of issue, just lightly asked about the content of the following document. Dare no soft egg. Colin, who didn't make the abacus, scolded Albert in his heart, and didn't even refute a word, which was a shame on the face of the scientific researcher, but he could only say with a smile on his face, the chairman is going to share your patent with Mr. Justin of Hammer Industries. This is the share you should get, Doctor. Well, what a surprise, thank you. Seeing the amount on the document, Albert made a surprised expression. In the licensing contract to Osborne Industries, Albert also gave Norman the right to freely share the patent with others, but stipulated the lower limit of the price, and a part of the dividends he was due for each sharing. Generally speaking, this kind of patent monopoly will be shared with others after the market is rolled out and enters the saturation period, but Norman knows that he does not have the ability to encroach on enough markets in a short period of time. He is not in the military industry after all, so in order to collect funds as soon as possible to conduct research, he can only reluctantly give up long-term interests, and prepare funds that can be received in the short term from Hammer Industries, which took the initiative to come over. This is also a good thing for Albert. The more money in his hand, the more capital he can leverage. How to act next, depends on the results of the test. I hope not to deviate too much from his ideas, otherwise he will have to be tied up in the future, and it will be absolutely difficult to suffer liver pain. Chapter 13. The next day, at the Caesars Palace Hotel in Las Vegas, Rhodes waved his hand with a black face, drove away the waiter who was going to come to entertain, and went straight to a gambling table full of audiences. He had reason to be angry. Such an important awards ceremony, Tony actually missed the appointment. If it wasn't for Obey Day to save the scene, he didn't know how he should get off the stage. It's just too much, and when he sees Tony, he'll have to teach him a good lesson. at least. At the very least, get that bastard to apologize to himself and promise never to do anything like this again. Rod was holding the trophy that should belong to Tony Stark in his hand, and before the person squeezed in, he heard Tony Stark's voice shouting, "Come on," which undoubtedly made Rod's face even darker because of his fantasy, and he pushed through the crowd. "We should have an all-nighter." Tony Stark didn't care about the result after rolling the dice, just smiled slightly, put his hands on the waist of a beautiful woman next to him, and didn't notice Rod, who was exuding a strong depression behind him. "You're so unreasonable, you should." Tonight Rod forced his way between the two, and was about to reprimand Tony to let him know how excessive he had done, but unfortunately, in front of this wanderer, Rod's words didn't make any sense at all. "Oh, that's unbelievable, do they have to give me the award?" said Tony, pretending to be surprised, his hands moving slowly around Rod's burly figure. "No, no one forced me, but they told me that you would be honored if I came to present you with an award." Rod nodded slightly, and unconsciously followed Tony's question, completely forgetting the idea of teaching him a lesson. Of course I'm honored, because you presented me with the award." Tony looked at Rod's face getting closer and closer, and he was really in no mood to continue flirting with the beauty, so he could only let go of the hands holding the beauty and said, "Then when will you give me the award?" "I'll give it to you directly." After saying that, Rod raised his hand directly and handed him the crystal trophy that Tony should have accepted on a more solemn occasion. "Here you go, it's much easier." "Oh." Tony shrugged his shoulders, apparently he didn't expect Rod to be so straight and bring the trophy here, so he could only take the trophy and apologize. "It doesn't matter." Rod obviously didn't hear it. Tony apologized for the perfunctory, shook his head slightly, and was about to say but was interrupted by Tony's next move. "You can help me see, this is really special, I really don't have this thing at home." Tony smiled and handed the trophy to the beauty from before, continued to bend down, pushed the chips on the table, and picked up 2 dice. "Come on, let them give me some good luck. Do me a favor?" Holding the dice in his fist, Tony straightened up, then stretched his fist out to the mouth of the beautiful woman holding the trophy on the side, and said with a smile, and when the beauty finished blowing with her wink, Tony put his fist in front of Rod's mouth, "You want to do it too?" "I never blow on a man's dice." Feeling that he was being tricked by Rod, he naturally looked at Tony angrily and said very dissatisfied, "Oh, come on, dear." Tony's dissatisfaction with Rod was as if he couldn't see it, and insisted on handing the dice to Rod's mouth, but before he finished speaking, the dice in his hand were knocked down by Rod with some anger. "That's it, the Colonel's dice." Tony didn't care about it, and when he saw the dice fall on the table, he immediately shouted to the audience. However, when the dice stopped, his face fell, and it was actually quite faceless. "Throw it away in vain, this point. It's not too bad." Seeing this result, Rod had no choice but to shrug his shoulders. "Do you want to continue playing?" "Oh, well, ladies and gentlemen, have fun." Looking at Rod's face, Tony knew that there was no need to play next, so he turned around directly, raised his hands and said loudly, then picked up 2 large denomination chips from the table, stuffed them into the chests of the 2 girls on the side, and then took the trophy and Rod left the table. "Tony, I'll go first." Successfully pulling Tony away, Rod glanced at his watch and said that he was leaving, but he felt that there was something that needed to remind Tony, "Don't be late tomorrow." Yes. The insincere perfunctory made Rod quite helpless, but it was not the first time he had seen Tony, so he had to leave first, otherwise he didn't know if Tony would be late, but he was afraid that he would be late due to lack of sleep. "Hey, Caesar's things belong to Caesar, Caesar, you take them." Sending off the chattering Rod, Tony saw 3 actors on the side, one of whom played Julius Caesar. Tony handed over the trophy directly, and then walked out of the door of the hotel directly, leaving an actor with a confused face. The moment Tony stepped out of the door, the whole world came to a standstill, and a red lightning bolt appeared in front of him through the crowd. Tony Stark, Iron Man, meet for the first time, have a good journey. The next second, the world returned to normal. Tony subconsciously turned his head to look in a direction. I don't know if it was a hallucination, he seemed to see a red shadow, but he was not sure. When he concentrated on trying to find, he couldn't find anything. Seeing this, Tony, who thought he was dazzled, walked to his car surrounded by bodyguards, pulled the car door and was about to go up, when suddenly a female voice came from behind him. "Mr. Stark, please wait a minute." Stark paused, did not look directly at the direction of the voice, but slightly sideways looked at the bodyguard on the side. Following Tony Stark for so many years, the bodyguard naturally knew what his boss wanted to ask, and replied without hesitation, "The figure is quite right." Hearing the satisfactory answer, Tony immediately put on a smile on his face and turned in the direction of the beauty. It seems that there is a big battle waiting for him tonight. Chapter 14. Oh, it only took 68 seconds to turn around once, which is pretty good. Residence in Manhattan, New York. Albert pressed the pause button of the timer, looked at the time displayed on it, and nodded in a good mood. The distance from New York to Las Vegas is nearly 4,000 kilometers, and the average direct flight takes more than 5 hours, and the round trip is 10 hours, but Albert only took a little more than a minute, and his speed has improved a little during this time. Even if he doesn't need to exercise specifically, his speed will naturally go up. This is a good signal, but also a not so good signal. The closer the connection with the speed force, the faster the speed of the speeder, but too close the connection, it will form a tug-of-war. Once the line is crossed, Albert may be in a certain run, be completely pulled into the speed force, just like the third generation of Flash, the Lightning Boy Wally West, imprisoned by the speed force. It's just that Wally has his girlfriend Linda as a belief support. Even if he is pulled into the speed force, he can also pursue his lover back to the real world. Albert doesn't have a lover, he has been a purebred single dog in his previous life until now. This method will not work for him, but even if the speed is constantly increasing, there is still a great distance from the speed of light, and when he reaches the speed that may be pulled into the speed force, the ghost knows how long it has been. When watching the awards ceremony before, Albert had a whim, and wanted to meet Tony Stark in advance, to see what the future superhero looked like before he became a hero, and also to test his long-distance running state. But Tony Stark saw it, but the perception was not good, and now Tony is a bastard who is arrogant, except for his own pleasure. He cannot care about anything. So much so that at that time, Albert almost smashed his fist in the face, but thinking about that state, Tony might turn directly into meat sauce with a punch, and he extinguished this idea. Alas, it would have been nice to just smash it down at that time. Thinking of Tony Stark's face, Albert's eyes had some abnormal red brilliance, imagining the feeling of a punch hitting it, and even subconsciously threw a punch. ZZ at the moment when this punch went down, the comm speed jumped violently, and the red arc flashed around the arm. No, what happened just now? Even if I don't like Tony Stark, I won't have murderous intent towards him at this time. The sudden reaction of the divine speed force made Albert suddenly sober up like a soul, and then an obvious sense of disgust rose from the bottom of his heart, but this disgust was not his, this belonged to the divine speed force. It's the speed force is disgusted with Tony Stark, and even wants to kill him. Why? Although the speed force has no personality, it is not a dead thing that is completely unconscious, and it is not theoretically impossible for it to produce emotions, but why the speed force will have killing intent towards Tony Stark, this Albert can't figure out. And the most important thing is that Albert left Las Vegas directly, and only after returning to New York did he feel the obvious killing intent. If the speed force really wanted to kill Tony Stark, the moment Albert saw him, he was already dead. In that case, if the speed force suddenly went out, even Albert could not save Tony Stark, but nothing happened. Speed force doesn't really want to kill Tony Stark. Albert made a certain guess, but thinking about the clear disgust is not fake, and Speed Force has no personality, just a subconscious. It is impossible to show such a difficult behavior as deception, so Albert quickly determined another possibility, what suppressed the Speedy Force, and this suppression ended after I was far enough away from Tony Stark, so I felt this belated killing intent. This is one of the most likely scenarios, but what can suppress the Speed Force? Albert gasped at the thought of this, and felt a little chilly all over his body. It seems that in this world, there is really no free lunch. There is no love for no reason, and there is no hate for no reason. Albert tried his best to avoid thinking about the source of the Speed Force and why he chose himself. He was afraid that if he figured it out, he would lose it, become an ordinary person again, experience this extraordinary power, and let him be an ordinary office worker. Albert really couldn't accept it. Now Albert still doesn't know the answer to the question, but the price of gaining power is already in front of him, and if the Speed Force wants to kill Tony Stark, maybe the target is not only Tony Stark, but how should its idea be executed? This is a big question. If it is a normal Tony Stark, even if he becomes Iron Man, Albert will not hesitate to choose to follow the will of the Speed Force, but if Tony Stark has the existence in his body or around him, which is enough to suppress the existence of the Speed Force, then even if he has the heart, he does not have that power. Lying on the bed with some irritability, Albert tried to communicate with the Speed Force. Maybe Tony Stark was no longer around, and the emotions of the Speed Force came and went quickly, so after a while, it had returned to normal. Albert followed the familiar feeling, and his consciousness once again came to the ocean of Speed Force. He looked at the familiar stone gate not far away, and the next moment he was stunned. He didn't know when it started. The white light that shrouded him before had disappeared, and now there was no longer an obstacle between the stone gate and Albert. Is it because of Tony Stark? Consciousness trembled, Albert guessed, and then approached the stone gate without hesitation. Now he was tied to the Speed Force, and if he wanted to solve the dilemma, he could only get closer to understand it. Maybe this door could tell him something he didn't know. In front of the stone door, Albert's consciousness extended with the help of the Speed Force, and touched the door with complex lines. Albert felt that it might be a painting. No, not just one painting, but many paintings stacked on top of each other, the lines between the top and bottom mixed together, making it impossible to see the content of any one at all. Chapter 15. Wait, this is the symbol of the Speed Force. Groping along the lines on the stone door, Albert returned to the one he saw at the beginning, missing a small piece, this time without the white light barrier. He found a sign similar to lightning in the messy lines, which made him think that maybe it was this gap representing the Speed Force that gave him strength. Since the sign of the Speed Force occupies a corner, does that mean that there are other similar signs? Unlike the intermingling of lines, the special signs are obviously deeper and not easy to cover completely. Albert observed more carefully, and finally made a new discovery in another place. It was a circle. Several signs formed a circle, and inside the circle, there were also two vague signs. Albert could not make out the appearance of all the signs, but he could be sure that there were 9 of them, and one was exceptionally clear. It was the simplest one, only a few strokes, 2 horizontal lines, one at the top and bottom, and a circle in the middle. Albert recognized this sign. It belonged to the Green Lantern Corps. Then this whole pattern represents the 9 Lights Army, and the power of color and light is also one of the strongest energies in the DC universe. Here it is. Omega shape, Darkseid's Omega rays? This mass down there is an anti-life equation. Wait, I didn't pay attention at first. Here's Superman's logo, Batman, and it should be the logo of Wonder Woman. These are the vital cores of the DC universe. After a closer look, Albert found some more signs that could be vaguely recognized. Some he knew, some he didn't understand what they meant, but these all came from the same world, alongside the Marvel multiverse, the DC multiverse, the birthplace of the Speed Force. In other words, behind this door, is the DC universe. Albert's conjecture seemed to be correct, and if he really endured some kind of irresistible crisis, this door might be his hope of escape. But how do I open it? I figured it out, but what to do to open this door, Albert still didn't have a clue, and there was a feeling of pulling in the speed force, which was a precursor to him being kicked out of the speed force. Albert thought about it, and controlled all the speed force around him that could be controlled for him, and stabbed the stone door in desperation. Boom! As if someone had smashed his head with a hammer, Albert got up from the bed in a daze. He felt some liquid flowing out of his nose and ears, and he stretched out his hand. It was all blood. It seemed that his final death was very successful, and he almost died. Leaning on the head of the bed and resting for half an hour, Albert felt that the dizziness subsided, and the world became clear in front of him, so he hurriedly went to the bathroom to find a spare medicine kit and wiped the blood on his face. Ha, ha, it's almost over, but it's not completely useless. At least I know how the door opens, and why did the Speed Force kill Tony Stark? After packing everything up, Albert tried his best to calm down, his still beating heart at high speed. The force of speed and the impact of the stone door allowed Albert to successfully obtain some information, and many questions were solved. First of all, the Speed Force doesn't have to kill Tony Stark, it's just that killing Tony Stark will open the door faster. What blocked that door was not the power of the DC Universe, but the power of the Marvel Universe, which was an invasion, and behind that door was the passage for the DC Universe to infiltrate the Marvel Universe, so the door would show a variety of different supreme forces in the DC Universe. When that door appeared in the Marvel Universe, the instinct to resist the invasion caused the universe to block the door, but now that the door has appeared, the blockade may not be able to completely prevent the invasion of the forces behind the door. With the passage of time, the power behind the door gradually became familiar with the rules of the Marvel Universe, so one day, as a representative of extreme speed, the Speed Force stripped a small part from the door as a carrier, and this kind of entered the universe, in the continuous drifting, and finally fell into the earth, and was obtained by Albert's predecessor. If Albert hadn't crossed over, the predecessor would probably have been chosen by the divine speed one day, and then become a glorious Urwuze, who would have contributed to opening that door, and if he failed, he would have gone down in history as a villain. Of course, Albert's situation is not much worse now. The door is still closed after all, and the forces behind it will not be able to enter the Marvel Universe in large numbers, and it is already the limit to infiltrate the Speed Force into this world, so if you want to open the door, you need to do it in the Marvel Universe. As long as the power of the Marvel Universe is weakened to a certain extent, the power behind the door can directly and rudely open the door without unlocking the blockade. Every life or a powerful force is the supporting force of a universe, and the more special life or power, the more powerful the pillar it represents, and as a superhero like a sun, Tony Stark, there is no doubt that he is one of the strongest pillars of life. That's why the Speed Force showed such obvious emotions when he saw Tony, but the power of the Speed Force alone was still weak in the Marvel Universe, and when it came to fighting against Tony Stark's protective power, it obviously fell into disadvantage, causing Albert to react at all at that time. Chapter 16. It's not really about scolding Stark, it's really a lot less of a problem than before. It's even more terrifying. Albert, who knew the truth, was desperate. He thought that he could do whatever he wanted with the speed power, but the price was actually against the whole world, which was also terrifying. Destroying the power support of the universe, obviously this is a proposition, but not doing it, it is also not a good choice. While blocking the door, the power of the Marvel Universe is also wearing down the stone gate, and the white light on the stone door is a kind of protection, and this protection has disappeared. This means that the Marvel Universe has recovered after the initial invasion, and this is still its home turf after all, and it is a matter of time before the stone gate is completely worn out. But if the stone gate is worn out, what will Albert do? Not to mention, the Speed Force has no source, it will definitely disappear, and even more, when the stone gate is weakened to a certain extent, the Speed Force it throws will definitely be perceived. If there is a second or five boy in your house who uses the power of the enemy, what will you do? Albert didn't have to think about it to know what would happen to him. Now he was tied to the speed force and even the stone gate. When the door opened, he would live, and when the door was gone, he would die. If they could live, no one would choose to die, even if it might be against a universe. Albert had already died once, and he didn't want to experience the horror of a second death, so he had to complete the task of the speed force, for which he almost had to bury the world, more than half of his life, and he meowed for a time limit. This is a basically impossible task. If he starts to destroy lives, no matter what the reason is, he will face the resistance of countless people. Although the speed of the force is strong, it will definitely be beyond the reach of the time. However, if he can't complete it, it doesn't mean that others can't complete it, and Albert hasn't forgotten the problem he was worried about at the beginning, the disaster of Thanos' destruction, using 6 Infinity Stones to destroy half of the life in the universe in an instant. This is Albert's only chance of success, when the Marvel Universe will fall into a state of extreme weakness. As long as he survives to the end and destroys the 6 Infinity Stones, the Stone Gate will come with the power of the world. But this still can't get rid of the question, how can Albert win the bet, that 50% chance of survival? At present, there are 2 ways. The first is what Albert was worried about before, because he was too close to the Speed Force, and was imprisoned by the Speed Force, as a thing in another universe. The Speed Force is not within the control of the Infinity Stone. As long as he is in the Sea of Speed Force, Albert does not have to think about whether he will be wiped out. But once imprisoned by the Divine Speed Force, it will be difficult for Albert to come up with it, and after a long time, he may annihilate the physical consciousness and completely become a puppet of the Divine Speed, so there is no need to think about it until there is a solution to this problem. The second way is to replace Thanos to carry out the mission of destruction. Then he will definitely be fine, and he doesn't have to wait for Thanos to complete the task, and then go to his hand to grab the Infinity Gauntlet. This method solves the trouble, and at the same time on the blue star Albert has almost no natural enemies, and there are currently 3 Infinity Stones, Cosmic Rubik's Cube, Ether Particles, Agamotto's Eye, on Earth. Basically Albert can get his hands on it. The other 3 that are not in the blue star are also easy to do, as long as Albert keeps at least one of them and lets Thanos find the remaining 5 according to the plan. It is not impossible for him to make a profit by then. The only question is whether he can just win Thanos. Compared to the first one, which is not actually operated, the second one is more feasible, and at the same time, Albert also has a direction to work towards, just to make himself stronger than him when facing Thanos. Very well, the problem is solved, and now it depends on whether I can survive or not. With a hard lift on his waist, Albert bounced off the bed, and everything was back to square one. He wanted to be stronger, to be strong enough, just to be able to live. The increase in speed power also has a new answer after Albert attacked the Stone Gate. He doesn't need special training, he just needs to stay active. As I said before, even if Albert didn't do anything, his speed power has been growing in the past few months. The reason is that now, compared to a virus implanted in the DC universe, as long as he still exists and continues to move, it will have a certain impact on the universe, even if this impact is negligible for the universe itself. But this subtle change will make the same amount of speed force be injected on Albert, which is the reason for the growth. And the greater the change caused by Albert, the more speed force will flow into his body. If he really killed Tony Stark, an important person, at that time, a moment of turmoil would be enough to make Albert's speed skyrocket from 300 times the speed of sound to the speed of light, about 880,000 times the speed of sound, or even more. Replacement, change, destruction, and all actions that cause turmoil will allow the power of the DC universe to infiltrate more of this world, and Albert will become stronger and stronger. Looks like my previous setup is crooked. Rubbing his chin with a tiny beard, Albert smiled and thought that replacing Norman in control of Osborn was only the first step, and then Albert would have to prepare for other important events. In such a world, perhaps every hero is bound to become a hero, but the road is walked by people, and the process of reaching the end may be smooth sailing, or it may be full of thorns and bumps. Since they can't kill them, Albert will incarnate into every obstacle in their path, and will also clear some superfluous obstacles for them, so that every coincidence that prompts them to forge ahead will be reduced to the ordinary, and the time for their growth will be extended as much as possible. Chapter 17. Which is better, respected or feared? I say, can't you do both at the same time? Allow me to introduce the weapon that was born for this purpose, Stark Industries' flagship product, the first anti-gravity missile ejection system, which integrates our own rapid counterattack technology. Some people say that the best weapons don't need to be fired, and I beg to differ. I think the best weapons only need to be fired once, which is what the fathers did, and all Americans, and so far it has worked. Just make an excuse to launch one of these missiles, and I assure you that the bad guys will definitely hide in the cave and not dare to come out. With that, Tony Stark hooked his finger at the missile rack next to him and motioned for the operator to press the button. Then I saw that the missile system quickly began to move, and in the sound of mechanical operation, it slowly rose and slowly pointed towards the distant hills. After about 2 seconds, a sudden roar erupted, and the missile quickly rushed into the sky with a tail flame. Then the shell of the missile exploded in the air, revealing the appearance inside, and more small missiles scattered from it, and after a very short time of calibration, flew out of the carrier erection, slashed through the tails of Mars, and crashed into the undulating hills. For your information, Jericho missile, the words fell, and the missile hit the ground mound, making a roar like thunder, and a burst of fire erupted in the distance, as well as black smoke covering the sky, and then a gust of air carried the dust and rushed over, directly blowing away the hats on everyone's heads. Even if Tony Stark, who was standing a few meters closer, had to take 2 steps forward in a row to offset the shock wave, even if the specific power has not been measured on the spot, just the shock of watching from a distance has already shown Jericho's unparalleled lethality and effective attack range. As long as it is within the coverage range, few things in the world today can survive. Great! Seeing the power of the missile, the surrounding officers showed a hint of joy and shock on their faces, and slapped their palms vigorously. For every $500 million in business, give a case of wine, for peace, cheers. Tony Stark walked to the frozen box with a natural face, took out a glass of wine that had already been chilled, and walked towards the direction of the armored car by himself. He believed that everyone present would try their best to persuade the Ministry of Defense to place a sufficient number of orders for Stark Industries. Tony Stark took his phone out of his pocket, and when he connected it, he saw Obady lying on his side on the bed shirtless. Obi, what are you doing? I can't sleep if I don't know what happened to you. What's going on? Obady put one hand in the quilt and grasped a small communicator, ready to press it at any moment. It's nice, it's as lively as Christmas. Nodding, Tony Stark said lukewarmly, he has no ill feelings towards Obady now, and even some respect. After all, he helped Stark Industries survive the difficult period after Howard's tragic death, but he is too boring, and always wants to let himself work in the laboratory honestly. Hey, there's something waiting for you, kid, we'll see you tomorrow. Obady, hearing Tony's answer, pressed the communicator in his hand without hesitation, and said meaningfully. Nodding his head undeniably, Tony Stark hung up the video call and sat into the armored car without thinking much about it. Hey, Tony, shouted the soldier next to the car, and as the door was closed, Rhodes in his hat ran over from behind. I'm a happy Jeep, and your boring Jeep is behind. Tony put his hands on the window to block Rod, pointed to the back and said, seeing this, Rod could only helplessly walk to the back car, he always does. Hey, what's that? Watching Rhodes leave, Tony Stark smiled and was about to withdraw his gaze, but inadvertently saw a red afterimage, which made him feel a little familiar, as if he had seen it somewhere before, and subconsciously asked the soldiers on the side. What? The soldier asked, looked in the direction Tony was pointing, but saw nothing. Mr. Stark, there is nothing there, and there can't be anything, we have ensured absolute safety here. All right, let's go, then. Tony Stark suddenly felt uneasy in his heart. Even heavily armed GIs could not dispel this haze, so he urged the soldiers to get on the road as soon as possible. He didn't want to stay here any longer. Naturally, the soldier had no opinion on this, and the soldier in charge of driving the car rushed out with one foot on the accelerator, and the long convoy began to move forward. The fact that he was able to see me was a big problem. Albert frowned at a mountain some distance from the convoy. He had been around Stark to see what the power that protected Stark would affect him, but before he got closer, he felt Stark's gaze, projected on him, which was incredible. Even soldiers with excellent eyesight would not be noticed when they walked past their eyes at Albert's speed, but Tony Stark could faintly sense his presence from such a distance, which was undoubtedly very bad news for him. And this doesn't seem to be the first time. In Las Vegas before, Tony Stark may have seen him, and he also felt it when he left, but because of the impact of the stalemate between the speed force and the power of this world, he didn't pay attention to it. You can't see it in person, but you can sense my existence to a certain extent. Should I say that your sixth sense is amazingly powerful? Albert pouted his lips rather unhappily, looking at the terrorists less than 50 meters away, using rudimentary launchers, dropping bombs one after another, undoubtedly Stark industrial products. It seems that our genius Mr. Stark is about to reap the consequences. Chapter 18. Who are you? Raza quickly drew his pistol and looked vigilantly at the man who suddenly appeared behind him, a slightly hideous mask wrapped around the other party's head, making it impossible to see his face, but as a warlord who has been living and dying for a long time, he knew very well that the other party was an absolutely dangerous person. Don't be so nervous about the people who saved you. Ignoring the modified pistol in Laza's hand, which could blow people's heads at any time, Albert approached the warlord leader with murderous intent very leisurely, and the bullets in the opponent's magazine had already been withdrawn by him at the speed that Laza was unable to see. And you have a gun that has no bullets, so I don't feel threatened. What? Raza was subconsciously stunned, and then years of experience in holding a gun made him instantly judge that what Albert said was right, and the gun in his hand became lighter. When it's time to shoot them later, don't forget to put them back in. Albert threw the silver-white bullet on the table, sat down in Laza's place, propped his chin with his hands, and looked at Laza, whose face was pale. How did you get there? Who told you to come? We can talk. Raza could be sure that the bullet would be absolutely fine until he pulled out his gun and pointed it at Albert, which was beyond his imagination, so he didn't shout to attract the guards outside in the first place, but wanted to see what Albert wanted to do. Since he didn't do it at first, it means that there is room for negotiation. Unlike the average thug, Raza doesn't hate violence, but if communication can solve the problem, then use voice to decide the outcome. Of course we can talk about whether my request is obedience, kneeling, or death. Choose one. Albert picked up a grenade from the table, turned around and saw the sign on it, Stark Industries. Hee, Obey Day really sells big and small things. You want me to listen to you? That's not a good choice. Raza looked at Albert with a kind of neurotic look. He had to admit that this guy dared to come to his base alone. He did have some ability, but he just didn't have a clear mind. I don't know how you did it just now, but this is my territory. As long as I give an order, there will be dozens of heavily armed soldiers at any time, rushing in and killing you. Can you still unload all the bullets? Your people, do you want to meet you? Albert's face under the mask showed a playful smile, and before Raza could say anything, a red lightning bolt dragged him to the outside of the tent, and looking at the pile of corpses in front of him, Laza's pupils dilated for a moment, and inexplicable fear spread in his heart. To bend the knee or to die, I am waiting for your choice. Gently patting Raza on the shoulder, Albert walked over to the corpse pile and picked up a handful of dropped micro-punches. Oh, it's a product of Stark Industries again. If the American military captures this place and finds these equipment, will it be Stark who is raised for these terrorists? Submissive. In the face of superhuman power, man is always easy to succumb, even if he is a complete villain. what is happening today completely beyond Raz's cognition? Could it be that Albert is a Superman secretly cultivated by the American military? No, 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 Captain Me is not so scary, he is a powerful human at best, but this... In front of him Raza didn't know what to call Albert, the mysterious man in front of him, easily took out his entire camp. He swore that from the time he walked into the tent and then met Albert to now, it was not a few minutes to now, such a short time, only God can do such a thing. Of course, it could also be a demon. Raza didn't dare to determine whether Albert was a god or a demon, and looking at his men who woke up one by one, he knew that if he made the slightest move, he would turn into a real corpse the next moment. Boss, what should I call you? Raza quickly brought in the roll, so that the subordinate who woke up with a bewildered face, returned to his post, and stood in front of Albert respectfully, completely unable to see the ferocity of pulling out a gun and threatening Albert before. You're smart, I like that, call me Speedy, isn't it? Is Raza smart? Not too smart, just not stupid, but he's survived until now, but he can't understand the situation very well. Compared to Obedi, he's just a little ant, trying to kill him is too easy. Karaza not only dared to seek skin with the tiger, but even tried to extort a sum of money from the tiger. Should it be said that the benefits were too great, or was he too unable to withstand the temptation? Okay, Mr. Godspeed, what do you need me to do? You caught Tony Stark. This? Yes, I had a deal with Mr. Obadiah of Stark Industries, and he hired me to kill Stark. After saying that, Raza was afraid that Albert was here to save Stark, so he hurriedly added, but don't worry, Stark is still alive, I'm not so stupid to kill him directly. Stark is a gold brick, and he can make a new powerful weapon for me, which is the new Jericho missile. Have you seen it? Yes, it's a good weapon. In fact, I came from the test site with the convoy, and your people are very good at covering up traces as a conventional weapon. The Jericho missile is really good, but compared with various black technologies, it can't even be ranked. Take me to Stark. Yes, yes, you come with me. Hearing Albert say that he came with the convoy, Raza wanted to strangle the bastard who led the team to attack Stark in an instant. Not only almost blew up Stark's gold mine, but actually brought him back such a bad star. Now a good liberal warlord leader, immediately became a little brother. He suddenly regretted a little, he shouldn't have taken this deal because of greed. Chapter 19. Lord Godspeed, do you want to open the door? Drove from the camp to the cave where Tony Stark was being held, and Raza personally led the way with a dog-legged face, which really shocked the eyes of many of his subordinates, but seeing that their bosses were so respectful, they didn't dare to be presumptuous, and stood on both sides of the road with their heads held high and in an orderly manner. No need, with your medical conditions here, can you save Stark? Looking into the cave through the surveillance window, 2 terrorists were performing emergency surgery on Stark with a doctor named Yinsen. Albert just glanced at it and couldn't help but retract his gaze and asked, this can't be said to be rudimentary, there is no medical condition at all, Stark can survive, he really deserves to be the protagonist. Ugh. Well, I think it's okay. Asked by Albert, Raza also replied uncertainly, in his opinion, dead horses are treated as live horse doctors, and if they are cured, let Stark make him a weapon, and if he can't save him, then he can also ask Obadiah to pay for it, and he won't lose anything. But looking at Albert's attitude, it seems that he doesn't want Stark to die, so he cautiously added, do you want to transfer him to the hospital? Hospital? Is there any good hospital nearby? In his current situation, he can go to God at every turn, how can you transfer? And I can guarantee that if you dare to send him to the hospital, the American troops will destroy you tomorrow. Albert asked angrily, leaving Raza speechless, let them go on and see if Stark's life is hard enough. After saying that, Albert turned around and left. To be honest, when Raza proposed to transfer Stark, he was really moved. This was an opportunity to kill him directly, but as soon as he thought of the power that could be suppressed even by the Speed Force, Albert felt a stomachache. he could kill Stark at any time now, but who knows what the consequences would be. Albert, who had already planned his life, didn't want to die now. Of course, if Stark didn't survive and died violently during the operation, it would have nothing to do with him, but it was impossible to think about it, and sure enough, a few hours later, someone came to inform Raza that Stark had been saved. Raza stood up and looked at Albert for instructions, and in just a few hours, after seeing Albert's extraordinary powers, the fierce warlord had become completely accustomed to being a younger brother. Contact Obadiah and tell him that Tony Stark is in your hands and that if you want his life, you have to add money. Albert pointed to the computer that Raza was using to communicate, and motioned for him to talk to Obadi. But my lord, I have already set a very high number before, and if I continue to increase the price, Obadi may not agree. Raza said with some hesitation. He had blackmailed Obadi once before, and if he came again, he was not sure if Obadi would agree. It's okay, you just need to get in touch, remember the video. And don't underestimate Obadi's determination and his wealth, your so-called high price may seem to him to be no more than that. Yes, I'll contact you now. Hearing Albert say this, Raza no longer hesitated, first opened the computer's recording program, and then entered a special address, and soon Obadi appeared on the screen. Raza subconsciously turned around, wanting to ask Albert what he said next, but when he turned around, he found that Albert didn't know when he was gone. Raza, how are things going? I hope I can hear good news. Obadi had a smile on his face. He had received the news of Tony's disappearance. In his opinion, Raza had contacted him probably for a bounty. Remembering Laza's blackmail before, Obadi was thinking in his mind, how to send this fool to God so that he could have a clear mind. Of course, Tony Stark is in my hands right now. Previously, in order to get Obadi to pay, Raza had his men take a picture of Stark, and now he showed it to Obadi across the screen. He's quiet now. Oh, is he dead? Obadi asked more happily after staring at the photo for 2 seconds. Confirming that there was nothing wrong. No, not yet, he's just taking a nap. People always need to rest, don't they? Although Albert is no longer here, Raza doesn't dare to make any moves, and who knows when he will appear behind you, so he honestly carries out Albert's orders. Why don't you do it? Kill him, and you'll get that money. I don't think you've ever seen so much money in your warlord business. Obadi's eyes froze. Things were a little unexpected, but he couldn't contain Raza now. Of course it's because of the money, you're right, I've never seen that much money, so I'm going to ask for more, double the price, or I'll put Stark back. Listening to Obadi's somewhat contemptuous tone, Raza was very upset, so he did not hesitate to carry out Albert's instructions, looking at Obadi with a threatening face. You're looking for death, you want to gamble. Did you let Tony go first, or did my people kill you first? Obadi's eyes were full of fierceness. He had enough of the greed of this little deflated three on the other side, and this time he hit the bottom line, Stark must die. Then you can try, the US military base is next to me, it's a big deal to break up. Raza was not afraid of Obadi's threat, not to mention that he was originally a fierce thug, and now he has Albert, an extraordinary person as a backer. What is a mere Obadi? Prepare a new account, I hope to see Tony's body tomorrow. Obadi turned off the communication and slammed his fist into the mirror in front of him, sending debris flying everywhere, but soon he dialed another number. Hey, boss, what's the order? Solve Raza for me, at all costs. Obadi ordered, although this is not very safe, it may make people find some problems, but he can't bear it, and Laza's behavior makes him uneasy. He is not sure if Raza will actually kill Stark, so he must let his own people do it to ensure that Tony never comes back. Chapter 20. Tony Stark slowly opened his eyes. The sharp pain in his head caused his mind to go blank now, and he subconsciously wanted to relieve the convulsive pain by taking deep breaths. But as soon as he tried hard, he noticed the foreign body in his nose, and quickly pulled out the thing in his nose, It turned out to be a breathing tube. Just looking at the gray and yellow color on it, Tony suddenly felt a little cold. This is too dirty. However, in his brain and throat, the pain that came at the same time soon made him have no time to care whether the breathing tube was clean or not. He wanted to get up, but found that his upper body was fixed on the bed by the wooden frame, and he couldn't move at all, so he could only reach out and grope on the bedside table, hoping to find something to relieve the predicament, and if he couldn't find a glass of water, at least it would make his throat more comfortable. Soon Tony's hand felt the cold metallic touch, and he opened his palm and touched it. It should be a quilt, because the bedside table was much higher than the bed he was lying on, so Tony couldn't see the situation on it, so he could only carefully test and slowly pick up the cup. The pain and weakness left him with little strength, and even a glass of water was difficult for him to hold steadily, so he quickly had another force added to the cup, helping Tony Stark bring the glass to his mouth. There was no time to say thanks. The burning pain in his throat made Tony can't wait to drink the water in the cup. The cool pleasure crossed his mouth, and fell down the throat into his stomach, like a drizzle of wet and dry land. Tony didn't remember how long he hadn't experienced it, this kind of pleasant feeling, even if it was just a very ordinary glass of white water in his hand, but in his opinion, even the most expensive famous wine in his wine library could not be compared. "Oh, thank you very much. Can you tell me what the situation is now?" After drinking not a drop of water from the cup, Tony remembered the person who helped him carry the water, turned his head to look at the head of the bed, and was greeted by a bald man with a smile on his face. Anyone who saw the bald face for the first time would think that the owner of this face would be a thug, and Tony was no exception, so after asking, he cautiously added, "You don't want to kidnap me?" No, I didn't have the idea of kidnapping you. In fact, on the contrary, I saved your life." Raza has Albert's explanation, and has already released Tony Stark from the cave, although the medical conditions are still not improving, but at least Tony's first impression is not that he is imprisoned. "We found you in the middle of a battle with a group of thugs, when you were the only one or the one who fell next to you. It's hard to imagine that you could survive such a heavy shelling. I have to say that your luck is really good." Raza's words slowly revived Tony's memory, and he remembered what had happened before he fell unconscious. Their convoy was attacked, and the enemy firepower far outnumbered the GIs protecting him, and finally, Tony covered his head in pain. All he remembered was that a bomb exploded next to him, and he thought he was dead, but it seemed that God was still on his side. "Thank you, your kindness will be rewarded." Thinking about the cause and effect, Tony's eyes were full of happiness for the rest of his life, and at the same time, he was also very grateful to Raza who saved him. "This is to prevent you from moving around and pulling the wound. I can bring it, but don't act rashly, otherwise the wound will be very troublesome." Raza put his hands on the wooden frame, and when he saw Tony nodding, he unfastened the locks on both sides and removed the wooden frame. "Although you survived, the shrapnel has penetrated your chest, and we can only use magnets to suck the shrapnel, otherwise they will flow down the veins to your heart, and your life will be completely over." Without the barrier of the wooden frame, Tony lifted up slightly, looking at the bandage tied to his chest, under which was a circular magnet, and 2 wires were attached to a battery along the side of the bed, ensuring that there was enough suction at all times to secure the shrapnel that could kill him. "We don't have good medical care here, so it's a last resort." Looking at Tony's rattling magnet in his chest, Raza added, "If your condition improves, we can consider taking you to the hospital, but not right now." "I understand, thank you for saving my life." Tony came back to his senses and thanked Raza again. The current situation was completely beyond his expectations, but fortunately, his receptivity was not weak. Others tried their best to save him, and he couldn't say anything if he disliked it, although Tony was sometimes quite a bastard, but this kind of thing still couldn't be done. Just look at the surrounding furnishings to know that the other party is not a rich person. "Is there a phone here? I'd like you to contact the American garrison and have them send someone to pick me up." "But thank you, Tony doesn't want to stay here any longer, he needs better medical conditions, but as soon as he said the words of the American garrison, he saw that Laza's face instantly became unsightly, which reminded him of where he was. This is the graveyard of the Empire, and there are thousands of people who have enmity with the United States. This bald man in front of him can't be one of them, right? Tony instantly felt worried. We do have a phone number, but I won't help you contact the American garrison because we don't want to contact them because of something. Fortunately, although Raza did not look good, he did not do anything excessive, which made Tony breathe a sigh of relief. Are you afraid of them? You can rest assured that if you let me talk to them, I am sure they will not embarrass you. Seeing that Laza's attitude hadn't changed much, Tony continued to persuade him. No, you don't understand, no matter who you are, those butchers won't let us go, and as soon as they show up, they will want to kill us. If you want to contact your family, I can help, but it must not have anything to do with the American garrison. Raza decisively rejected Tony's idea. How much background he himself has in the American military, he knows that it is okay to deceive Tony Stark now. Once he contacts the American garrison, he is guaranteed to be beaten into a sieve in minutes. End of the chapter. Like and subscribe for more videos like this.